Ah, my dear, sit here because what I have to tell you may hurt a little, but it will open your eyes once and for all. Betrayal is not an accident. It is not a mistake. It is not a naive mistake. It is a cold, calculated, and selfish act. And you know what else? Those who cheat don't think about the pain they will cause, only the pleasure of the moment. But what few talk about is what comes after. The consequences, the late regret, the price you pay for playing with the trust of those who love you. Have you ever seen someone rebuild a crystal cup after breaking it into 1,000 pieces? Well, trust is the same thing. It may look like it was repaired, but it will always have invisible cracks, marks of what was once destroyed. And anyone who has experienced this knows the pain of betrayal doesn't just come from disloyalty, but from lies, manipulation, the hypocrisy of someone who swore commitment and then threw everything away as if it were worthless. And the worst, often the betrayed person still feels guilty, as if they had done something to deserve this disrespect. But listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you. No one deserves to live in uncertainty. No one needs to accept crumbs of a love they don't respect. If you feel like you are being deceived, if the trust is gone, if your intuition screams, stop deceiving yourself. True relationships are based on loyalty, honesty, and maturity, and anyone who doesn't have that to offer doesn't deserve a place in your life. And now, tell me, are you really willing to continue deceiving yourself? Or will you finally open your eyes? Because what I'm going to tell you next could change the way you see all of this forever. Betrayal is not just an isolated act. It is an emotional earthquake that leaves deep cracks in the soul of the person who trusted. When someone deceives, trust shatters like broken glass. No matter how much you try to mend it, the marks remain visible. The worst? Doubt sets in. If there was a lie, how many others could have been told? It's a blow to self-esteem, a punch to the chest of confidence, and an attack on mutual respect. Anyone who has been through this knows that the pain of disloyalty can be worse than loneliness itself. And the consequences, oh, they always arrive. Relationships that were once solid crumble within seconds when infidelity comes to light. And make no mistake, even those who try to stay together face a minefield of insecurity, jealousy, and resentment. Emotional and physical fidelity is not just a choice, but an essential pillar for any lasting commitment. Without that, what is left? A cold coexistence marked by manipulation, regret, and that anguish of never being able to trust completely again. Now, if you think that those who cheat get away with it, think again. The karma of infidelity does not forgive. It charges with interest and monetary correction. Today, the deceiver may even feel smart, but life has a curious way of giving back in kind. I've seen people who laughed at their own betrayal and cried when they felt the weight of the deceit. And there's no point in asking for forgiveness when respect has already been buried. But do you know what's most intriguing? The way men and women deal with betrayal. This opens up an interesting question about who cheats more and who knows how to hide it better. Oh, my dear, if there's one thing I've learned from observing relationships over the years, it's that infidelity has no gender, but has very different strategies. Statistically, men cheat more, perhaps due to the old culture of conquest, or the immaturity of thinking they will never be caught. As for women, well, they are more cunning. They know how to cover tracks, maintain discreet communication, and act without arousing suspicion. While many men stumble over their own lies, some women make cheating a secret art, hiding it under layers of manipulation and emotional intelligence. But make no mistake, better hiding doesn't make betrayal any less destructive. On the contrary, Oftentimes, female disloyalty goes unnoticed for years, undermining the relationship from the inside out. I've heard stories of women who had affairs on the side for decades, sustaining a facade relationship while nurturing another in secret. And when does the truth come out? The impact is devastating. The betrayed person feels doubly deceived, not only by the infidelity, but by the other's ability to pretend for so long. This undermines self-esteem, destroys respect, and can take anyone to emotional rock bottom. The big question here is not just who cheats more, but the devastating effect of lying within a commitment. After all, what's a relationship worth without trust? You can even try to ignore the signs, but sooner or later the consequences appear. Because the truth, my dear, has a funny way of slipping out no matter how hard you try to bury it. And when that happens, the pain is not just in the betrayal itself, but in the abyss that is created between what you thought you had and the cruel reality that has been hidden all along. And if a single lie can have this effect, imagine a whole set of mistakes. You know that saying, lies have short legs? Well, in a relationship, besides being short, it carries a huge weight. A single lie can be enough to transform an entire story of complicity into a sea of distrust. And it doesn't matter if it was a little white lie or a huge mistake. The emotional damage is the same. After all, if someone lied once, how can you trust them not to do it again? Confidence, when shaken, does not return in the same way. It can be rebuilt, but it will always have cracks. It will always leave that flea behind its ear. And you know what's worse? The deceived person suffers not only because of what they discovered, but because of what they begin to imagine. The mind becomes a veritable whirlwind of questions. Was that all there was to it? What if there is more? How long has this been going on? And the truth is that emotional betrayal often hurts as much as physical betrayal. I've seen people who were never actually cheated on, but lost nights of sleep because they felt something was wrong. Lies erode the respect, connection, and security that a couple needs to function. And when that happens, the relationship is no longer the same. And do you want an interesting detail? The more someone lies, the more hostage they become to their own hypocrisy. At first, it may seem like a game, a manipulation here, another there. But eventually, the mask falls off, because deceiving is not just hiding something from others. It is digging your own emotional grave. You may even cheat for a while, but sooner or later, the consequences appear. And then, my dear, when trust is gone, there's no point trying to rescue what once existed. And do you know what goes hand in hand with lying? The immaturity. But that's a conversation for a little while. Maturity is not about age, but about character. A relationship requires commitment, respect, and above all, honesty. And do you know what one of the biggest signs of immaturity is? The betrayal. Because anyone who truly understands the value of a relationship knows that emotional and physical fidelity are not options. They are pillars. Have you noticed how many people who cheat live on the defensive? They hide their cell phones, constantly change passwords, avoid certain conversations. It's the typical behavior of those who know they're wrong, but don't want to be discovered. Pure cowardice. Those who cheat are not just disrespecting the other person. They are demonstrating their inability to deal with feelings honestly. Instead of facing problems head-on, they prefer to hide behind lies and manipulations. But what does this reveal? Lack of maturity to face the consequences of one's actions. Because those who really value a relationship don't look for loopholes to deceive, but rather ways to strengthen the connection. Want an example? Mature people talk when something bothers them. while immature people seek external distractions to escape reality. And believe me, immaturity takes its toll. Today, those who cheat may even feel like they are in control. But what about tomorrow? Regret arrives, guilt weighs heavily, and loneliness knocks on the door. After all, who would want to share their life with someone who doesn't know how to be loyal? Relationships based on deception never last. Sooner or later, everything comes to a head. And when that happens, there's no point crying over spilled milk. Now, speaking of consequences, have you ever heard of the karma of infidelity? That one is relentless. The karma of infidelity. Life has a curious way of settling accounts. It may take time, it may come unexpectedly, but the return always arrives. Infidelity is not just a dishonest choice. It is an energy that sooner or later returns to the person who committed it. I've seen cases of people who cheated, lied, manipulated, and when they least expected it, they felt the same bitter taste of betrayal. And then, my dear, the story changes. That certainty that they would never be discovered turns into regret. What was once a joke turns into real pain. And it doesn't have to be a betrayal like the one they committed. Sometimes karma comes in unexpected ways. The deceiver may not even be physically betrayed, but he experiences abandonment, loneliness, and a lack of trust from others. I've seen people who spent years jumping from relationship to relationship until they realized that no one believed in them anymore. Because reputation, once tarnished, is difficult to recover. And there is no point trying to escape the consequences. The cycle always closes. Whoever sows disrespect reaps distrust. Whoever deceives will, at some point, be deceived. But here's an important question. Do you need to wait for karma to arrive to learn your lesson? Because real change happens when a person understands the impact of their attitudes before life teaches them a bitter lesson. The problem is that not everyone learns. Many insist on the same mistakes, repeat the same patterns, and believe that they will always get away with it. But the truth, fate is not usually generous with the disloyal. And do you know what could prevent all of this? Something so simple and at the same time so ignored. Communication. If there's one thing that separates healthy relationships from relationships doomed to fail, it's communication. Seems obvious, right? But believe me, many people prefer to hide feelings, pretend that everything is fine or worse, look outside for what they don't have the courage to resolve inside. And that's where the cycle of betrayal begins. Because when a couple doesn't talk openly about what they feel, what they need, or what's wrong, emotional distance sets in. And when emotional fidelity is lost, physical loyalty can only be a matter of time. Talking about feelings requires maturity. Exposing insecurities, fears, and frustrations can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. The problem is that many choose the easiest path, lying. Have you ever seen people who, instead of saying, "I'm not happy anymore," simply start acting in the shadows? He avoids conversations, looks away, hides his cell phone. And when betrayal happens, he comes with the excuse that he didn't want to hurt. But the truth is that hurting is exactly what they did, just in the worst possible way. Anyone who cares about preserving respect and commitment has the courage to be sincere. And you know what's most interesting? Many relationships could be saved with just honest dialogue. I'm not saying that every couple needs to stay together, but if a relationship needs to end, let it be with truth. Communication is what differentiates a respectful breakup from an end full of pain, lies, and resentment. But unfortunately, not everyone wants to take responsibility. For many, deceiving is easier than facing one's own disloyalty. And here comes the big question. Does betrayal really happen by chance? Or is it always a choice? Infidelity is a choice, not an accident. No one stumbles and accidentally falls into betrayal. It's not something that just happens. It's a conscious decision, a planned act, a deliberate breach of commitment. Those who cheat choose to ignore the respect, honesty, and maturity that a relationship requires. And you know what else? This talk of, "It was a moment of weakness," or "I didn't want to hurt you," is just a cheap attempt to escape the consequences. Because if there really was regret, the choice would never have been made in the first place. Betrayal doesn't come out of nowhere. It starts with small concessions, conversations that should be avoided, flirtations disguised as jokes, secrets hidden for convenience. Little by little, the person becomes convinced that it's no big deal, until suddenly, they cross the line of no return. But here's the truth. No one cheats without realizing it. There is always a moment of decision, and at that moment, emotional and physical fidelity should weigh more than any passing impulse. Those who cheat choose to devalue their own relationship, and this choice has consequences. Now, the question is, can cheaters really change? Or do you just adjust your strategies to keep cheating without getting caught? Because often the problem is not in the act itself, but in the character of whoever commits it. The question is not whether the person was caught, but rather whether they truly understand the impact of their disloyalty. And then we come to a crucial point. Infidels rarely change on their own. But do they really want to change? Or do they just want to maintain the appearance that they are sorry? Changing requires effort, self-awareness, and, above all, genuine will. And let's be honest, most infidels have none of this. What many want, in fact, is to continue playing the same game, just in a more discreet way. When they are discovered, they cry, promise change, give emotional speeches about repentance. But deep down, have they learned their lesson? Or have they just gotten smarter so as not to get caught again? Those who lie once and get away with it almost always feel comfortable repeating the mistake. Real change doesn't happen because someone gets caught. It happens when a person looks in the mirror and feels ashamed of what they have become. But few reach this level of self-perception. Most just adjust their tactics, making the manipulation more refined. I've heard of people who swore allegiance after betrayal, but deep down they just found more subtle ways to cover their tracks. And while the other party tries to believe in the recovery of the relationship, the deceiver continues to repeat the same patterns, only with more caution. So the question remains, is it worth investing in someone like this? Because a healthy relationship needs respect, commitment, and honesty. If one side always carries the weight of doubt and insecurity, the relationship is already broken, and no one deserves to live waiting for the next disappointment. Therefore, it is important to understand your own worth. Never treat someone as a priority if they treat you as an option. Relationships should be a safe haven, not an emotional battleground. Never treat someone as a priority if they treat you as an option. Do you know the biggest mistake that many people make? If you give completely to someone who only offers crumbs. Striving to build a solid relationship while the other person doesn't even bother to maintain a minimum of respect. And you know what's worse? Often those who are treated as options refuse to see the truth, clings to empty promises, clings to the hope that one day the person will change. But here's a reality check. Those who really care leave no room for doubt. I've seen women who dedicated years to a relationship, hoping that their partner would finally decide to value them. And what happened? They lost time, self-esteem, and in many cases, faith in love. The problem is not loving too much. It is loving without reciprocity. Relationship is not charity. If you feel like you need to beg for attention, something is very wrong. Someone who really wants to be by your side doesn't make you question your own worth. What's more, I would never put your trust and loyalty at risk for a moment of fleeting pleasure. So tell me, why keep insisting on something that disrespects you? If you feel like you're settling for less than you deserve, maybe it's time to rethink everything. And before you say, "But he swears he loves me," remember one thing: words without actions are just manipulation. Those who truly love show it. Whoever values matters. And when it comes to loyalty and respect, there are no excuses. And you know what they say out there? Statistics don't lie. Have you ever stopped to think about what the numbers reveal about betrayal? The numbers don't lie. While men cheat more, women hide it better. This is not guesswork. It is a fact observed in several studies. And it makes sense, right? Women tend to be more strategic, more careful with details, and often plan every move to avoid being discovered. While many men cheat impulsively and leave obvious traces, women tend to be more discreet, protecting their lies with a well-structured network of alibis and justifications. I've heard stories of women who managed to maintain double relationships for years without anyone suspecting. They change names on their cell phones, create well-organized routines, delete conversations, and make everything seem normal. For them, infidelity is not just a slip-up. It is a game of emotional intelligence and manipulation. This doesn't mean that all women are natural cheaters, but when they decide to cheat, they do so with more precision than many realize. And when are they discovered? Here comes a difference. The ability to reverse the situation and often emerge as victims. But calm down. This is no reason to be paranoid. The point here is to understand that betrayal has no face and does not follow a fixed pattern. What the numbers show is that female betrayal often goes unnoticed, while male betrayal tends to be more obvious. And do you know the danger of that? Many people live in a relationship for years without even suspecting what is happening. But if there's one thing that studies also indicate, it's that once trust is broken, rebuilding it is a real challenge. And when the betrayal comes to light, the couple's entire past comes into question. After all, how long was it based on a lie? Trust is like crystal. It takes time to be shaped, polished, strengthened. But it only takes one slip to shatter. Relationships are not built overnight. They require complicity, respect, and constant communication. But when infidelity enters the picture, everything that has been cultivated over the years can crumble in seconds. And the worst? No matter how much regret there is, it is not always possible to rebuild what was lost, because once doubt sets in, the couple's dynamic changes forever. I've seen couples try to stay together after cheating, but the truth is that, in most cases, the relationship never gets back to the same. Happy moments start to be questioned. Were they real or just an illusion? Every delay, every unanswered message, every change in behavior becomes a trigger for distrust. Love may survive, but lightness is lost. And living with the shadow of a lie can be an unbearable emotional burden. Because those who have been betrayed not only suffer from infidelity, but also from the fact that they were deceived by someone they believed in. And here's an interesting fact. Research shows that many couples who face betrayal end up separating, not because of the act itself, but because of the inability to restore trust. It's not about forgiving or forgetting, but about living with the uncertainty of, what if it happens again? And that's the big question. Whoever cheats once really learns their lesson? Or do you just become more careful not to get caught? Because the truth is that, for many, infidelity is not an isolated mistake, but rather a pattern that tends to repeat itself. Believing that a traitor will change just because he was caught is like believing that a wolf will stop being a predator because one day he was caged. Infidelity is not usually a one-time event. Most of the time, it is a pattern of behavior. Many promise change, cry, swear loyalty, but after the shock of discovery, they return to their old habits, not because they don't love, but because they haven't learned to respect. For them, the problem is not the betrayal itself, but the fact that they were caught, and instead of changing, they just refine their strategies. I've seen this happen several times. The betrayed person forgives, believes in the promises of transformation, and tries to start over. At first, everything seems different. More attention, more declarations, more commitment. But over time, the traitor feels comfortable again, and history repeats itself. After all, if you've already been forgiven once, why wouldn't you be forgiven again? This is how the cycle perpetuates itself. The victim deludes himself into thinking that the change is real, while the deceiver only perfects his tactics, until one day, the truth comes out. Again. And the question that remains is it worth getting caught up in this loop of lies and disappointments? Because at the end of the day, it's not just about love, it's about dignity. It is important to understand that broken trust is difficult to restore, and that no one deserves to live waiting for the next betrayal. If a person does not have the maturity to be loyal, do they deserve the privilege of your trust? The decision is yours. But before answering, I want you to reflect on something. What would a wise old woman have to say about all this? You are not prepared for what comes now. Now tell me, after all this, will you still accept less than you deserve? Will you continue to deceive yourself with empty promises? Or will you finally act with the maturity that this situation demands? Infidelity is not just a betrayal of another, but a betrayal of yourself when you pretend that nothing happened. Because in the end, anyone who continues to side with a deceiver without demanding real changes is betraying themselves too. And I ask you, until when will you accept being treated as an option? If this content opened your eyes, I want you to write, "I value myself," here in the comments. And if for some reason you still think that everyone makes mistakes and deserves a second chance, type, "I still have doubts," because I want to know who really got the message. Oh, and don't forget, if this topic makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because here I tell you the truths that no one has the courage to say. And in the next video, well, get ready, because what's coming will make you see relationships in a completely new way.